Good morning, Rabbi Rabotai. We are continuing on Shulchan Aruch Arachaim, Hilchot Tefillah, and we are at the end of Siman Tzadivav, Tzif Bet. Mutar le'echoz machzor tefillah biyado b'sha'a shemitpalel, ho'il ve'tofes lesorech tefillah atzma lo tarid. We mentioned the many things you cannot really hold in the time of tefillah. Anything that distracts your attention is something that you should not be holding during the course of tefillah. The question is, can you hold your sidur? So says the Shulchan Aruch, yes, of course you can. If you need it, you hold it. And we mentioned this already before from the Ben Ish Chai, whether or not a person could open his eyes. Generally speaking, especially Al Pi Kabbalah, a person must close his eyes during Shemona Esrei. But if you need to daven mitoch sidur to have attention, especially if it's the Tefillah of Yom Tov or Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, that you don't necessarily know all the things by heart, of course a person could look inside. But not to look around. It's not that once you're opening your eyes, you can look at anything. But keep your eyes in the sidur. Try to focus in those places that you need to look, and so on. And here is the same thing, that if you need this sidur of tefillah in order to daven from it, not just stam you want to hold your sidur, but you're davening from the sidur, because it's needed for your tefillah, you're not going to be distracted by the sidur of the tefillah itself, just like, and also it's the part of the mitzvah that you're doing, of mitzvah tefillah. Therefore it's like the lulav and etrog that we mentioned, that a person during the Chag HaSukkot, if he wants to hold the lulav and etrog from the tremendous love and appreciation that he has for mitzvah, and he wants to hold it in his hand during Shemona Esrei, Chazak u'Baruch, no problem with that whatsoever. So we mentioned that nowadays the modern application of this question would be cell phones. If you have a smartphone and you want to daven from a smartphone at a chatuna, at any event, not everyone is carrying the actual printed sidur with themselves, and that actually poses a lot of questions also, as we will see later on in Divarim Shebi Kedusha. You can't necessarily have a sidur when during the day you're going to go to the bathroom and so on and so forth. It poses some halachic challenges, but most of the people, forget about the halachic challenges, just practically speaking, most people don't walk around with sidur anymore. They want to bench from a smart sidur, so to speak, in their smartphones, and daven the same way. It becomes a question, because your phone now, it's a very expensive item, and hundreds of dollars, and if it drops, then you're in bad shape. It's certainly a challenge. It's a sensitive thing. It's a fragile thing. You don't want it to drop and break. And at the same time, it's a sidur that you're using. So is this Shulchan Aruch over here applicable or not applicable? This has become a question that many have written about. Actually, the Ratz Katzvi, my dear friend Tzvi Reisman, wrote a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago. He actually wrote a piece on this. And recently in our Choveret, we had another friend that wrote on this. And the general consensus seems to be, even though that this is not really something that has literature backing it in every aspect and every element, but general consensus seems to be that this is moving towards something that is normalized very much, and it would be mutar, given that you have turned off, and many of the apps nowadays, they actually give you that option. You turn off all the other notifications. It kind of like blocks your phone, and your phone turns into just a smart sidur, nothing more than that. So that's supposed to be done. You don't want to be looking, and you say Shema Kolenu, and then you have all the text messages and alerts and calls and so on that's coming in. That's what Shema Kolenu, Chuchaut Lula. That's a joke. Of course, you don't want to do that. Imagine to yourself, if somebody speaking to you is coming to ask you, he has for 1 year he's been trying to get an appointment with you, and you didn't have a time. Finally, you give him 5 minutes time. 5 minutes, and he comes in front of you and is with his phone there checking the messages and alerts and and pausing his thing. How disrespectful that is. Right? He's standing from Kadosh Baruch Hu. We have gotten an appointment with him. He has allowed us to speak with him. No one should have their phone on during the thing. Now, some people have doctors, they have emergency things, or when you see somebody do that, of course, it's on us to give the benefit of the doubt. But people have things, sometimes it's an emergency thing, their wife is in labor, who knows what's going on, you never know. But in general situation, a person should have derech eretz for Ribono Shel Olam. Right? Daven, he should not be distracted. Now, halachically speaking, also this is a thing for distraction, and of course, en lecha distraction more than the fact that you have your calls and alerts and texts and other social media popping up on your phone. Of course, that's not mutar. So therefore, if a person is opting to daven from a sidur, you put it on airplane mode. Right? You're flying, you're going to Shmeh Shamayim, your tefillah is flying, so that's the ultimate airplane mode that the person should have really in their tefillah prior to davening, to starting from daven. But again, we don't seem to be concerned too much about dropping the phone and breaking the phone and so on and so forth, especially if your phone is insured and so on. It's not necessarily going to be a problem. You're using it for reading from it, and that would be perhaps okay. So that.
What if you're in the middle of using your smartphone and then you get a notification and you realize I forgot to put my phone in airplane mode? What should you do? Should you put it in airplane mode?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you pause. You stop reading. You stop saying the words. And you put it. It takes what about 0.1 second. You put it in an airplane mode, and of course, because you don't want to further distract yourself. You know what I mean? That's so that is basically the Shulchan Aruch, and the Rama adds, "Mikol makom im lo haya biyado kodem sheitchil." It says if you're not holding your sidur before you started and you start already Shemona Esrei, don't go around looking for a sidur. If you know where sidurim are and you need the sidur for tefillah, אלא אם כן היה במקום מיוחד שהוא מוכן, אז מותר ליטלו אפילו בתוך תפילה כדי להתפלל מתוכו. Then you could walk directly to the shelf, take the sidur. When you need to daven from a sidur, you could walk and get the sidur and walk back and continue your tefillah. So it says Maran in the next Siman Sadi Zayin. This is just the code of conduct when it comes to yawning, burping, the activities of bodily activities that are not considered respectful. Primarily those two that we mentioned. Says the Shulchan Aruch, lo yekahek velo yefahek. You should not burp, you should not yawn during the tefillah. And if you have to yawn, then yaniach yado al piv, then cover your mouth. The yawning should not be obvious and visible from outside. And the Rama adds that a person putting their hand under their chin during the tefillah is something that's not necessarily considered a respectful conduct either. And says the Mishna Berura to this. If a person be'onest, that means unintentionally yawned, which is usually the case, or even burped, says the Mishna Berura, both of them are the same. And again, for burping, you don't have to put the hand there because there's no opening of the mouth, and necessarily, so it's a little bit easier to deal with that. It's not that difficult necessarily, and the Ben Ish Chai says the same thing, but the Kaf HaChaim says that you should be careful even with burping to put your hand in front of your mouth, or if a person needs to sneeze. Right now, either a person is under the weather and sneezing, or actually the Gemara in Masechet Brachot says that sneezing during the course of Shemona Esrei is a good siman. If it's not intentional, it's a siman that HaKadosh Baruch Hu actually likes your tefillah. This is not necessarily a negative thing, but if it does happen, you want to control it. That it shouldn't sound too loud. It shouldn't be and especially if a person is in the sibur, you also have to be careful with that, especially if a person is under the weather, for ben adam lehavero as well. So, if a person is davening alone and nobody is there to see him, the Ben Ish Chai and Kaf Chaim both write that still a person should be covering his mouth, because not necessarily just a Ben Adam Lehavero thing. It's a conduct of tefillah in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you have to be respectful because of Kavod Hashem, not just because of the people who may or may not be there. Now, the Mishna Berura writes this, that you shouldn't put your hand on your chin during the tefillah. Hainu lechia tachton. That's the bottom piece of the jaw of a person. The chazanim hausinken b'shat hazemer. If a chazan needs to do that for the musical tuning of his hazanut, then mutar. Because they are trying to tune their voice properly for hazanut, for kavod of the tefillah. So that would be mutar. Then if not singing actually in that moment, then it will be a problem. The Kaf HaChaim is not so happy with this thing altogether. And it says, you want to be man'im et hakol, do it in a different way. Make your voice tuned. You don't have to make it very loud and too high pitch, and try to do it without this. And this way you don't need to put your hand over there and be looking in a disrespectful way. And that's the psak of the Kaf HaChaim. Says the Shulchan Aruch in Sif Bet, asur lo larok, a person cannot spit in the middle of tefillah. Right? We spoke about spitting in the shul before. A person cannot spit in duration of his Shemona Esrei, and if he can't, if it's impossible for you not to spit, you kind of like if you have a handkerchief or a garment, you could just kind of like put it there. That would be the proper way of doing it. But if you are too sensitive, and now there's the level of sensitivity is much higher in this generation, you can't just if you have a mucus or a spit, you can't just put it in a piece of your garment or article of clothing, and people don't necessarily carry a handkerchief. But on the other hand, we also have boxes of tissues all over the place, so it's a little easier in that way. But again, if you have no access to a box of Kleenex and you have nothing else, you have to either spit or put it in your talit or in your suit, which you're too sensitive, you don't want to do that. Says the Shulchan Aruch, if you're sensitive, you don't want to do that, then you turn around, at least you face around, and you spit back into your back, not in the front. And if you can't do in the back, then you do to your left, but not to your right, and certainly not in front. The asur, that would be prohibited. He says, if you take a look later on in Shulchan Aruch in Siman Kuf Chaf Gimel, that over there you turn your face around to your left side first. שהוא ימין של הקדוש ברוך הוא, יש לומר, דתם כיוון שמעולם לא ירדה השכינה למטה בעשרה, ואם כן אין השכינה כנגד המתפלל. So it says there, we discussed that when you go back to say עושה שלום, you first say עושה שלום ממרומיו, then you say הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. So you turn first to the left, which is the right side of Shekhinah. So you see, left is more important than right when it comes to tefillah in that way. So the Rama answers that the reason there is because Shekhinah never came down more than asarat fachim, samuch to the ground, Im ken, en השכינה כנגד המתפלל, the Shekhinah is not כנגד the person that's davening in that way, and therefore, חלקו כבוד לימין דידה ברקיקה שהיא בשעת תפילה, אבל כשנוסע 3 פסיעות, אדם מרחיק עצמו ממקום תפילתו, והוא כנגד השכינה. When you are going back 3 steps, that you're distancing yourself from the makom tefillah, and now you are in front of the Shekhinah, and therefore you give shalom to the semol, which is the yamin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu first, and then to the right. So says the Mishnah Berura. Let's try to cover this if in Mishnah Berura as well. Says the Mishnah Berura, La Rok. וכל שאסור בתוך התפילה, אסור אפילו בתחלולים שאחר התפילה. It's not just Shemona Esrei, but even in Ana LeDavid that you're saying, that's also extension of the tefillah itself, and therefore it will be asur. The כל זמן שלא פסע, הווה לכעומד, sorry about that, this is not the Ana. This is תחלולים שאחר תפילה before you step back. Sorry about that. Meaning, you stop the tefillah at the end, but you haven't stepped back 3 steps, and you are davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tachanunim is a private tefillah, private cries that you want to cry out to Hashem. That because you have not taken this 3 step back and finished officially your tefillah, even though that you are done with the text of the tefillah, still considered part and parcel of the tefillah, extension of your tefillah, and therefore it will be asur as well. The any time that you have not stepped back, it will be considered omed bifnei hamelech, and on that. Even though that you finished your tefillah, your private tefillah, but you still have not stepped back 3 steps, will be included in this as well. Because again, you have not excused yourself, so to speak, from in front of the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore it will be asur still to spit. That's what the Oración writes, and others as well. It seems like more pashut. There's not the din in your private tachanunim, but it's a din in the fact that you have not excused yourself from the presence of Shekhinah yet, and therefore it will be problematic to spit. Now, שלא יהיה נראה כגון בבגד תחתון, אבל בגד עליון, says the Mishnah Berura, even if you're not a sensitive person, you cannot put it in your talit, when you have a mucus or a spit, because that, by itself is disrespectful. And במדינתנו, it says in Ashkenaz, in our place, שלובשים פסלס, אף שהרוק נראה, אפשר למותר לכיוון שעשוי לכך. They had some sort of clothing that was made for this, at least a piece of it, a part of it, so to speak, and therefore, אין בו משום מיאוס. It's not disgusting. It's not considered something disrespectful. And מאוס, כן כתב המגן אברהם. אבל שערי האחרונים, it says that's the שיטה המגן אברהם, but others disagree with that, and therefore, they hold that even in that, you need to wrap it around. לכרוך מקום הרוק שלא יהיה נראה. It cannot be visible outside. That by itself was this disrespectful. And if you are sensitive and it's disgusting for you to put it in your garment, in your clothing, then or you cannot hold it in your mouth anymore until you swallow it, and you don't want to swallow it. So it says the Mishnah Berura, then zorko la'acharav, that you turn around and you spit it towards the direction of the back. That means you turn your face around and you spit, or any other way of spitting in the back. So on that, the Kaf Chaim writes that after tefillah, you go and you rub it to the ground. Again, we're talking about a generation that didn't have flooring the way we have flooring. It would be just dirt, and then you go and you kind of like smear it to be nivla in the ground, because that's not the kavod of Bet Knesset to leave a spit there. Nowadays it would be, if you're in the back, you go quickly and you clean it up, of course, the way it should be done. Of course, you don't throw it spitting towards the up direction, that's disrespectful, and also is not it's counterintuitive anyways. You can't spit just the way you're standing in front of, towards the Echal and spit in front of you, because that's like you're in front of the presence of Shekhinah, is considered a disrespect. Now, the Shulchan said something very interesting. The Shulchan gave a reasoning behind this of the right versus left, that you do to the left, even though that in Siman Kuf Chaf Gimel you bow to the left first, and the Ramah tried to explain that. So the other poskim, the Achronim, give a simple answer, not complicated. Say here, when you want to spit, you don't want to be Kereged the Shekhinah. You stop your tefillah, you pause your tefillah, you're embarrassed to do what you're doing in front of Shekhinah. So you actually want to show that I'm not in front of the Shekhinah now doing this, I need to do this bodily need that I have to spit. I don't want to be in front of Shekhinah. So therefore the halachot of this does not follow the halachot of a person that's standing in front of Shekhinah. So automatically your right is more important than the left, you spit to the left. But when you step back from the tefillah, you finish your tefillah, you're stepping back, you want to show that I'm excusing myself now from the presence of the Shekhinah, and I'm bowing towards the Shekhinah. So then you bow, say shalom, first to the left, which is the right of the Shekhinah, is more important. So that's a simple answer that the poskim, the Achronim, give. And Uchmosh Katuv Besiman Gimal Linyan Hitkabdu Mechubadim. We discussed this in the laws of bathroom earlier on in the beginning of the Shulchan Aruch, that you do first Yamin and Simol of the person. Mash'enken Besiman Kuf Chaf Gimel, there in the halachot of Tefillah, when you go back at the end of Tefillah, you bow, you want to actually display kavod to the Shekhinah, and therefore you do it in that way. Then your kavanah is directly to excuse yourself from the presence of Shekhinah, and therefore you do it you do it to left first, which is the Yamin Shekhinah. Bezrat Hashem, we will continue the next Sif Gimel in the days to come. Chazak u'Baruch.